Hi, good afternoon, folks. Welcome back. My name is Dr. Thomas MacManus. I am the Acting Director of the International State Crime Initiative at Queen Mary University of London School of Law. It's a great honour to be here with old friends and new friends, and it's particularly a great honour to be moderating this panel on resisting genocide. We're going to go in order of the programme. We have two colleagues joining us online. And we're going to talk about archives, Palestinian resistance, archaeology, and the erasure of Palestine. And we'll have, at the end, expert testimony on the BDS campaign. Hopefully, we will have time for any questions or interventions that there may be at the end, maybe a short amount of time if we are lucky. And otherwise, I think we're just going to dive straight into it. We're going to start off with looking at the Gaza Tribunal archive with Andy Simmons, and Michelle Burgis Kasthala is going to join us online. This is a joint presentation. Just to quickly introduce the panelists. Andy is a retired British Library curator of 20th century UK publications, and prior was a curator of the largest black archive in the US. He currently manages the best online bibliography of Palestinian history books, now almost 1,000 pages, and a website of rare Palestinian publications, including newspapers starting from the 1930s and UNRWA magazines from the 1960s. And Professor Michelle Burgis Kasthala, who we were very grateful to have yesterday as well, is Professor of International Law and Global Governance at the University of Edinburgh. So, with that, I will hand over to Andy to start off. Thank you.
Thank you. I think most of you have used a library sometime in your life. In the old days, it would be printed things you seek out. Nowadays, it's a combination of that and electronic things. And as librarians and archivists, our main challenge in the past few decades has been to go back to the printed things and digitize them. That gives a backup, and it also allows it to be shared thousands of miles away to other researchers. We take this for granted. But these are the good old days, and things are going to get worse, as they are every day now. Why, just this morning, since dawn, a Gaza journalist, Osama al-Ahmed, was bombed in his home, along with 8 other people in the house. Okay? These things are happening all the time. You missed me. The ICC's Karim Ahmad Khan and his staff are being erased, courtesy of the White House, from their Microsoft data. It can't happen. It's happening now. And this cannot allowed to happen with the Gaza Tribunal. Now we have to think of the dangers of the cyber attack, right? How to avert it. At least 7 years of my workaholic effort at the British Library now does not exist in practical terms due to initially to a cyber attack back in October 2023 of the British Library. Further to the library's IT failings. Marks and Spencer's department store, if you've heard of that, in the UK, they're now commercially offline due to a cyber assault. These things are happening all the time. As for what's going on documenting this tribunal, we will get the audio, we will IT transfer it to English and in other language, Turkish and Arabic, of course, and hopefully other languages too. But it's not as simple as that. I will, at first, comb over the English translation, eliminating all the ums and things like that, and the echoes, and getting spellings right. This will take me a while, but the text then will be what people refer to more than the audio or the video, because it takes less time to read than it does to sit through days and days of video. So that's what will happen to preserve what's going on here. This is a document, and where we store it, well, I don't know yet, but hopefully an open access archive. Now, preservation of this tribunal will be decided, and I make a case here for full open source access with the urging of any individual or institution to download the whole lot. That way, the material is not just held in one location, whether it's a university or whatever, so that anyone can get it, and then if it's hacked somewhere, it exists somewhere else. This is evidence. So I should say that any at-risk identities of people who have been witnesses in this tribunal, their names will be redacted in a sense. So the tribunal will know who they are, but they won't be putting themselves at risk online. That's important too. Now there's the temporality of the evidence itself. This series of panels has occurred at a certain point in time, and so someone may use the evidence given here as part of a legal case somewhere, okay? Dated evidence to be used later on. And I should say that what's obvious to us here may not be what someone wants. We can never second guess what researchers, whether they're legal researchers or not, may want from this. Someone mentioned something as a witness just in passing, and that could be very important to whatever it is their project is. So something that's minor, just a sidebar now, could be germane to someone's argument in the future. Let's say they're not researching Palestinian case in Gaza in this tragedy. Maybe they're researching climate change. There we go. Or home life. There we go. So we want to preserve this. And in my experience, on the side, I digitize anything that I can, old publications, UNRWA publications. I've done a series of Palestinian newspapers from the 1930s onward. These don't exist now in most places. Think of all the universities in Gaza that have been crushed. They had special collections. Every university does, but they don't exist now. A few weeks ago, I was on an online seminar with a Palestinian who collected Gaza books, Gaza publications, not publications about Gaza. He's from Gaza, but published in Gaza, okay? And he spent 35 years collecting these books. So at the end of his online talk, he showed two photographs. You can sort of guess what they'd be. The first one was an image of his huge library documenting Gaza as a publication hub. And the second photo was rubble. So there's no time like the present in this digital age to document what's going on and share it so that anyone can download it. And if you have anything that you want to share with me later, any ideas of documenting things beyond the Gaza Tribunal, I mean vintage items, please approach me. Thank you very much. And Michelle is here, and I enjoyed your talks yesterday. Fascinating. I couldn't take notes fast enough. And here you go.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. Well, Andy is really our expert very much on archival practice. I'm just a bit of an interloper, but I have a fascination with the link between archival practices and atrocity accountability work, because this was an incredibly important initiative that has gone on for over 10 years in relation to Syria. And so here really I want to think about how we can learn from some of those really important practices that obviously have taken place in many sites of atrocity. and think about how they can inform our own responsible archival practices here at the Gaza Tribunal. So firstly, I just wanted to remind you that the ICJ, obviously we've all taken note of some of the key provisions that the ICJ has handed down in the South Africa case, but things that we tend to overlook are these aspects of the dispositive paragraph. For example, in January, the court calls on the state of Israel to take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence. I won't read the rest. So already we can see in the midst of genocide, at the very heart of the adjudicative process, the recognition of the centrality of evidence and its erasure. And so there's already this really absolutely vital sense of responsibility being invoked here by the ICJ, but also for ourselves. And we've just heard from Andy about deliberate attempts of erasure. And so part of the work then of the Gaza Tribunal with its archive is to counter that erasure. But in doing so, we have to think about what archive we're building. For whom will it speak? Who will use it? Yeah, who has access to it? These might seem like, you know, esoteric questions, but they're going to have massive implications for our work. So I just wanted to take you back. I find it really fascinating to the word archive itself. It actually comes from the ancient Greek word arche, which means beginning or source or origin. And strangely enough, it then morphed into words denoting aspects of governance, because in fact, the government official called an archon would house documents in his, not her, in his house. He would store government records there. And so his private dwelling also became a public site of housing state, as we might say today, state documents. And so we have this wonderful sense then of the private becoming the public, but also of power, this link between evidence or documents and power. And over time then we have this word be used, picked up in Latin and French, and then eventually English that we have today, our sense of archive. And what some work by social theorists have really focused on then is sort of picking up on the power inherent then in this act of housing, and we've heard wonderful things now about housing, this act of housing, and then very much as being about a process of working out who has access to these materials. So basically to construct an archive then is an act of power and of privilege. And oftentimes then it's states that have been the key drivers of our archival building. And if you think about all of the main archives in the world, most of them are in some form state sponsored. So then Stalder would say to us then that we have to think of archives as sites of epistemic and political struggle. Archives are about choosing what can be included and what can be excluded. And at this moment, very much as a genocide is occurring hour by hour, what can be documented about that genocide and what will be erased, it will be absolutely crucial in how we, unfortunately, remember and retell the events of that genocide. And I think as well, what's really interesting with this idea about the public and the private is some of the testimony, for example, we heard on day one, was extremely personal, it's extremely private, it was really harrowing, but it can also be transformed into a public archival testimony and memory. But we need to make sure that the way we rehouse those memories, those private moments of pain, is done in a really respectful manner. And that's why I think it's crucial we think about how the Gaza Tribunal approaches its archival practice. So very briefly, I just want to say that obviously civil society efforts in relation to archive building have been fundamental to earlier accountability efforts. I hope that some of you will have heard of the really amazing work of DC CAM, which basically was initially, strangely enough, set up by a US piece of legislation, but eventually basically provided funds to a university group at Yale, who then ended up documenting extensively the genocide in Cambodia. And crucially, their work was the only source of evidence that then informed the ECCC, the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. So here then we have a very direct link between atrocity, archive, and a particular form of accountability in the form of a post facto criminal trial. And I think that type of work really has informed a lot of more recent civil society activities. So one really great example, you can obviously go and look at their website, is the Syrian Archive, and they're part of a larger group of this group called Memnonic, and it's built 4 standalone archives relating to Sudan, Yemen, Syria, and Ukraine. And they're basically, their point is, as Andy I think has really beautifully encapsulated, to retain the materials. And they don't know what the materials will be used for. It's not up to, in some ways it's not up to them. And in some ways I think that's also the point for us. We can't sort of prescribe exactly how the future of this Gaza archive will unfold, will play out. But I think it points very much to the responsibility that we have here. If I suggested that archives tend to be state-based, what we're doing, very much linking back to the points I made yesterday with people's tribunals, this archive is, I think, an overtly non-state-based type of archive. So we might see it as a counter-archive, an archive that speaks more generally to the Palestinian people. But we'll have to keep thinking about who our constituency is, how the broader constituency can feed into this so that we can be respectful builders of public memory. We must always be asking ourselves whose memories are being included, in what terms, to what end, for which public. And I just want to end by reading a wonderful 2-line quotation from the work of Kirsten Weld, who looked at the atrocity archive work in relation to Guatemala. And she said, "To exhume a paper cadaver or rescue a document is to stave off oblivion. To look backward, to prevent stories and lives and traumas from being forgotten, and to accord dignity to the dead, disappeared and displaced. But while to delve deeply into dark pasts is an act of remembering, it is also a constructive act. It's one of imagination." And I mean, I think really we need to take that with us. You know, this is the practices of archives are not about the past. It's about this link between a past, many pasts, the present where we are now, but also the future. We can't predict that future, but I think in trying to be as respectful and ethical in our practice as possible, we will, I think, open up more potentiality for how this Gaza Tribunal will contribute to a future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next we have Professor Abed Takriti, who's at the University of Rice, and will introduce himself and his own affiliation. And he's going to talk about Palestinian resistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I work on Palestinian history, and in particular on Palestinian revolutionary history. And I assume that's why I was asked to speak on the subject of Palestinian resistance today. But I think it's important to first talk about resistance in the context of genocide, and to reflect a little bit on genocide and the question of violence. Historically, carrying out a genocide is a highly complex endeavor that cannot be achieved without a set of prerequisites. Firstly, and most importantly, genocides arise out of a profoundly skewed military balance of power on the ground, in which one human group is able to destroy in whole or in part another. And underscore able here. You have to have the capacity to do so, which means armed capacity. In every genocidal situation, the perpetrators have superior access to the means of violence while the targeted group does not have the level of armament or military organization necessary to adequately defend itself against this destruction. That doesn't mean that it doesn't try, but it means that it doesn't have the force to stop it. Secondly, and interconnectedly, genocides require determined perpetrator leaderships armed with an ideological framework that accords with the destruction in whole or in part of a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. In colonial situations, genocidal ideology always corresponds by definition to the conquest of the land as well as the subjugation and/or removal of the people in it, a process that cannot be achieved without armed violence against the native. Genocides almost always occur when pockets of resistance remain after the total or partial conquest, and the colonizer leadership decides that it wishes to upgrade its tenure over the land from the level of stability, stable hold over the land, to that of incontestability. By that logic, destroying the other through mass murder and/or total removal permanently removes the threat of contestation. That we are seeing happening in Palestine, and that has been going on. There's a history that has led to that in Palestine. Thirdly, genocide requires willing perpetrators, armed units that are willing to carry it out, and a social context that can endorse or at least offer no resistance for perpetration. In the context of small colonial states like the Israeli one, and these states depend on semi-universal conscription, this is a heightened condition. You have to have, when you're relying on almost universal conscription, in the Israeli case, the only exempt group from the colonist society is the ultra-Orthodox, then you need to have a society committed to violence against the native, and that in this case, the case of the Gaza genocide, is open to the idea of destroying the native. Fourthly, genocide, and especially in our current age of hyperinformation and instant reporting, requires an international context that allows for these acts to happen. In the case of Palestine, this means great powers, imperial powers, willing to supply the arms and to give the diplomatic cover and to deter neighbor intervention towards stopping the genocide. Now, in all of these four cases, there has to be some kind of legitimation discourse. And always the legitimation discourse is the idea that the native is carrying out resistance. You don't frame it as resistance, though. It's framed historically in the case of Palestine, during the mandate period, for example, as insurgency, is framed as public disorder, it's framed as irrational violence. We had multiple framings in the early history of Palestine colonization, and by the way, terrorism. It came in early. Later on, it took a much more organized set of concepts relating to the idea of, again, terrorism, also sometimes sabotage. Palestinians refer to as saboteurs. The imagery that corresponds to that is one that either entails comparisons to insects or rodents or reptiles. In other words, it's an imagery of a threat that needs to be removed comprehensively, in the same way that when you're confronted with any of these beings in your house or in your garden, you bring a pesticide company, they eradicate it. So to justify total violence on this scale, on this genocidal scale, you need to totally reduce the native to a phenomena of an everlasting, irrational, and evil threat. The native is expunged from the realm of politics. That is the Palestinian experience. The difficulty here is, of course, one that has to do not only with these discourses, but also with the actual willingness of states to deploy them and the agendas behind them. Because the politicians that are actually making those speeches, comparing Palestinians to insects and rodents and snakes, in the Israeli case at least, they know that this is not what it's all about. They know that this is about political choices. If you want a colonist context in which there is total acquisition over the land, then you're not giving the colonized population a way out. And then you require eradicationist solutions, or solutions that can ensure complete pacification in the absence of eradication. That means if you don't remove the people, that's one option. The other option is completely break their will and ensure permanent pacification. They know that this is what it's about. We know that they know this because people like Netanyahu, for example, follow the ideological precepts of revisionist Zionism. If you go back to Jabotinsky's Iron Wall, you will see that he refers to the idea that in colonial situations there is no option other than the total combat of the native. He says that there is no way you can talk to the native. You're not going to reach an agreement with them. The only language that can allow you to achieve your objectives is the language of force. It is disrespectful to the native to think otherwise, because they've always resisted. And he makes comparisons with the conquest of the Americas, with the native populations there. He says Palestinian populations are not better or worse than them. The same way that those populations resisted, there will be resistance here. He makes comparisons to other contexts of colonization. So they know what they're doing here. But they cover it with this discourse, both for mobilizational purposes on the ground internally, but also for mobilizational purposes externally. They need to give a language that allows their allies and sponsors. In this case, it is their sponsors are the most powerful country on earth. That is, yes, an imperialist country, because yes, it has more than 800 bases worldwide, reach across the globe. So yeah, that's an empire. And it certainly acts like an empire because it acts above the legal norms that it was supposed to have enshrined in the post-Second World War order. It chooses when they're applied and when they're suspended. But even that sponsor needs a language. So the language is Palestinians are engaging in violence. Therefore, Israel has a right to defend itself. This room, of course, has a lot of international lawyers, so you know that this is completely faulty logic in the international order, at least since the Second World War. This is going back actually to a logic that the great Palestinian scholar of the laws of war, Carmen Abulsi, called the Marshallist logic, the Marshallist tradition of war. This was the tradition that was established by empires and colonial powers, one that saw war as having no limit. This is the logic of the armies of conquest and domination. Okay? Now, the current logic, of course, of the existing state system is something else. She calls it the Grotian logic, which is the logic of imperial powers and major states finding some common ground between them. So they had to create some norms to manage the conflicts between them. This is what led to the idea of civilian protections and so on. But this tradition of war has certain limits. They don't benefit non-state actors, which means colonized peoples. But they certainly allow for a framework for some protections. And then you had the third tradition of war, which is, of course, the Republican tradition. It came out of colonized peoples, occupied peoples, peoples that, and the philosophers that articulated it were thinking of those cases. People like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and others, they were engaging with the Polish occupation of Poland in the 18th century. They were engaging with the virtuous republic in Corsica. They ignored, of course, colonial situations outside Europe, but still, the logic can be extended there. And certainly, colonized peoples extended it there. That's why Toussaint Louverture, when he was dealing with the question of enslavement and colonization in Haiti, appealed to that logic, to a Republican logic, to the idea of citizenship, the idea of patriotism, the idea of liberating occupied countries. Palestine fits within that tradition. It has also other modes of articulation when it comes to the notion of its people's freedoms, because it can also, different groups in it that have emerged historically, have engaged with other concepts that predate this Republican tradition of war. For example, there is a tradition of Islamic just war. What do you do when your land is attacked by an external power? Under that Islamic tradition, you have not only a right to resist, you have the responsibility to do so. The difficulty in the current global order is that that language can easily fit with the logic of the war and terror. In other words, it's not understood in relation to the situation of the Palestinian people, who are colonized people, that are fighting for their own survival, as it should be clear now for everyone in this room and beyond. Instead, it's presented as an irrational, barbaric tradition, just using the word Islam has been, as a result of course, the Islamophobia that accompanied the war on terror, and the nature of the initial groups it was fighting. It's easy then to reduce a great national liberation struggle like that of the Palestinian people to those categories for the purposes of delegitimization. So this is the difficulty when we're dealing with a question of resistance. And by the way, resistance is a new word in the Palestinian lexicon. We didn't used to use it. It's a new word in anti-colonial struggles also. Resistance became popular after the French launched resistance against the German occupation of their country during the Second World War. Before that, our discourse was one of revolution, thawra. That was the mandate discourse. And by the way, in the mandate period, we only launched one thawra. So we tried other options historically in Palestine for what we are calling in this session resistance. So initially, we had more than 18 years between the British occupation of Palestine and the decision of the leaderships of Palestinian society to confront that colonial violence with organized with an organized revolutionary violent response. Before that, they tried diplomacy, they tried the Palestinian congresses, they tried non-cooperation, they tried boycott, they tried every political and diplomatic avenue. Because unlike actually the colonial enterprise, which requires permanent violence, the anti-colonial enterprise experiments with different options for resisting this colonial violence. These can include a wide range of strategies, tactics. After 1948, it became clear to Palestinians that if you do not have military capacity, you will be expelled from your homes. That became a haunting question for them. And what made it even more difficult is that those leaderships in Palestinian society that were not advocating for auto capacity for carrying out military defense and thought that you can depend on the regional system around you to protect you because the settler colonial endeavor of establishing a colonist state primarily brought from Eastern Europe and Central Europe to Palestine, they thought that that's not going to be allowed by the state system around us. That's why they were saying the Arab armies will prevent this from happening. After the Nakba, you had the situation where that theory failed. There were some people, though, that counted on regional intervention from surrounding states on the basis of revolutionizing these states. That's why Palestinians engaged with the logic of resistance initially that saw the transformation of the surrounding Arab region as opening up a space for change. He wanted to, I know we're running out of time, but allow me, because actually this is central for this. The main logic that's used. Yes, of course. I'm going to stop. Go ahead. But we can talk in the questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have lots of speakers to get through, so apologize for cutting you off. Now we have Akram Lilja, and if we could get his presentation up on the screen. Akram is a professor, researcher and guest professor in the Historic Conservation and Cultural Heritage in Sweden. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yes. I will start my presentation. I will try to fix myself in 10 minutes. This is the picture of El Pasha Palace Museum in Gaza. And people in the old city of Gaza thought that cultural heritage sites, mosque, is a safe place because it is cultural heritage places protected by the international law and Hague Convention. So people moved to the places like the mosque, the cultural heritage sites, and the old city around Gaza. And Israeli tanks get in and before destroying the El Pasha Palace and the museum, they evacuated all the artifacts from the museum in addition to the storage of the museum and moved these artifacts to Israel as a military power. And thanks for Amek Shameh, an Israeli organization which is fighting against the colonial archaeological activities in the West Bank. So they followed the telegram and the Instagram of the minister, the minister of Authority of Archaeology in Israel, and he is was so proud to disseminated these information through Instagram and through the Telegram, that we got access to artifacts and archaeological founds in Gaza. Then they destroyed all the complex. And from there, I can start in hurry. Netanyahu, when he started his speech, started his war and declared the war in Gaza, started not only from Jabotinsky ideology, they started from religious mythology, and he tried to mobilize all the Jewish people and all the Jewish community in Israel in order not to put it as right and left. So he started the declaration of the war against Gaza by Amalek. And in the Amalek in the Torah, the Bible, means the people who inhabited Gaza during the Bronze Age, Middle Bronze Age, and he asking it's time to slaughter Anakim. And he asked the IDF to rank the number of how much you kill. This is in our way to liberate the Jewish people, without ranking as much as you can killing of the Palestinians in Gaza of Anakim. We will not protect the Jewish people. Next, please. So, defense minister in that time tried to dehumanize the Palestinians to justify the killing, and he said, "We are fighting human animals. This is, you are gallant." Next, please. So Netanyahu instrumented the Bible in order to, which is referred to as Canaanites, Palestinians, and Anakim, who are living in the southern part of Palestine near the coast. This is Gaza. You have to kill Anakim there. Next, please. And just to give a picture here, Gaza, according to demarcation agreement 1949, used to be 565 square meter, not 65 square meter. And in 1995, this area is annexed illegally by Israel in that time without any justification, only because as a buffer zone from those people who tried to go from Gaza to their villages in the Negev to bring their something from their houses, until they used to cross Gaza to bring something, some crops, so they took a buffer zone illegally from Gaza, and no one knows about this. That was an illegal agreement between Egyptian leader, Egyptian military leader in Gaza, and the IDF in that time. Next, please. Gaza historically used to be an crossroad for all the economic and the trade activities, Silk Road and the Spicy Road. Next, please. Also, it used to be a Canaanite state cities. like Tel el-Ujul, like Tel el-Sakan, Gaza. So there were many state cities within Gaza across the Middle Bronze Ages and Roman, Papillion, Greek, and so that two sites completely demolished during the war because both are located in Netzarim, which is cutted Gaza south to north. They located in that axis, so they demolished all the two sites. Next, please. Here is the distribution of archaeological sites in Gaza, and we registered 226 archaeological sites and historical buildings with highly cultural values, which is completely or partially destroyed. When we are talking partially destroyed, that's mean more than 50% of the building has been destroyed and the sites is completely bulldozered. Next, please. Here is the Shatta refugee camp and our dear Shatta refugee camp, Anthedon. Anthedon is the Hellenistic harbor with the background cliffs of the Roman site, which is linked also to the harbor, the Anthedon harbor. It's completely demolished as a part of getting in the northern part of the Shatta refugee camp in Gaza. Next, please. Here is the monastic Christianity, Saint Hilarion. And Saint Hilarion is located in the middle of Gaza, and it's protected by the French government, and despite it is a World Heritage Site, this site also has been damaged. Next. St. Berverius, a church. And here St. Berverius Church is another story. And when the Christian community fled to the churches in Gaza, Catholic and Roman Orthodox and Baptistic church at the Baptistic hospital in Gaza, the Israeli forces striked the church and killed 3 families, Christian families within the Roman Orthodox Church. And the deputy mayor of the municipality of occupied Jerusalem, Mrs. Rouhana, she get out to the media and told people in Gaza sending fake news because there is no Christians in Gaza at all. So this is the Palestinian speaking of something it's not exist. They are talking about churches. Who said that Gaza has, there are churches located in Gaza? Who said that there is a Christian community located in Gaza? And then after 1 month, they killed in the Catholic University, they killed 4 nuns. Snipers killed 4 nuns. And also Mrs. Rouhana repeated on the media, on the TV, her story that there is no Christians living in Gaza. Next, please. The same is Islamic era, Mamluk and Ayyubid and Ottoman cultural heritage and buildings in Gaza. The majority of these sites has been completely damaged and destroyed, especially when we are talking about Mamluk architecture and Mamluk Ottoman mosques in Gaza. Next, please. This is El Pasha Palace. When I mentioned it was a museum, and it's the place where the Sanjak leadership, Ottoman Sanjak leadership used to base. here, and this is evacuated, hosted the majority of archaeological founds in Gaza, and all of it's looted by a state government. Yes, please go and hurry. Now, many sites in Gaza has been destroyed. This is a set of, before, go back. Here is a storage of the thousands of archaeological founds in a safe place in Gaza, and the French flag over this site, because it's not under the sovereignty of either Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. It is under the sovereignty, the control of the French institutions and the French schools of architecture, who digging in Gaza since 1994 in more than 27 sites. So they informed Israel about the storage. They informed them about the place, and unfortunately here in Hebrew, they disseminated the soldiers and the department officials at the Department of Archaeology. We accessed the archaeology of Gaza. We brought them back home. Bring back home, they are not hostages. These founds excavated after 1994 during the Palestinian Authority era. So that is, and this is a site also completely destroyed in a Roman cemetery, which is discovered only 1 year before the October 7th, and it's completely destroyed. Next, please. Next. Here the harbor. I'm just, this is a part of places have been completely demolished. Next. A great mosque in Al-Omari. There are many motives why they need to destruct cultural heritage in Gaza. There was no collateral damage to the archaeological sites in Gaza. All the damage has been targeted directly, intentionally, to destroy the link between people and the local community and their identity, social identity. It's part of uprooting people from their contexts. So, next, please. International law. Israel violated the international laws and the protocols and regarding the cultural heritage. Hague Convention, 1954 and 1999, which is damage of cultural heritage. It's part of war crime. And not only cultural heritage, most religious places, in addition, schools, universities, libraries, archives, all these places are protected according to the Hague Convention to protect cultural heritage under the armed conflict. 1972, the UNESCO World Heritage in Danger. We have a number of sites which is listed under the danger, list of danger, and these sites are protected by the UNESCO laws. International Criminal Court found army leaders in Mali, former Yugoslavia, guilty of war crime because they destructed cultural heritage intentionally. And UN Security Council resolutions prohibited theft and the trade in cultural property coming from Iraq and Syria in that time. So This resolution is can apply to other places around the world. When the army, state army, colonial army, and taking archaeology from Gaza and confiscated this, the last. Here is a list of the conventions that both the destruction of cultural heritage in a place of crime, war crime. The next, please, the last. Mr. John Hocking, member of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, says, wherever there is cultural destruction, there is suspicion of genocide. The destruction of heritage is a tool for destroying human groups. International law treats the deliberate destruction of cultural property as a war crime. The Nuremberg Tribunal ruled that attacking monuments and historical buildings without military necessity constitutes a war crime based on Article 6b of the Charter. The last, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And now we will be joined by Omar Bargouti, who's going to give us some expert testimony. Omar is a prominent human rights defender, probably known to a lot of people in the room and watching, and he's the co-founder of BDS. I'll pass it over to you, Omar. You have about 15 minutes before we get to our lunch break. Thank you.
Chief called on the Security Council to act decisively to prevent genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, adding that, quote, every single one of the 2.1 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip face the risk of famine. 1 in 5 face starvation, end of quote. According to UNICEF, since the resumption of its bombing of Gaza, Israel has killed or injured 100 Palestinian children every day on average. On March 18th alone, when it shattered the shaky ceasefire, Israel massacred in a few hours over 400 Palestinians, including 170 children, mostly while sleeping. A day after, echoing daunting language from 1930s Germany, Israeli War Minister Katz directly gave all Palestinian survivors of the US-Israeli genocide an ultimatum: accept ethnic cleansing or face total destruction and ruin. Prominent Israeli historians of the Holocaust and genocide studies, Daniel Blattman and Amos Goldberg, have concluded, quote, what is happening in Gaza is not the Holocaust. There is no Auschwitz there. However, it is a crime from the same family, a crime of genocide, end of quote. Even former Israeli senior military leaders, themselves accused of horrific war crimes, have recently come out against Israel's carnage. Former Deputy Chief of Staff of the Israeli military, Yair Golan, has said, quote, a sane country does not wage war against civilians, does not kill babies as a hobby, and does not engage in mass population displacement, end of quote. Moshe Ya'alon, former war minister and former chief of staff of the Israeli military, has accused the Israeli government of sending the army to Gaza to commit ethnic cleansing and kill them all. He said, I expect the state of Israel not to send soldiers to kill Palestinian babies and women, end of quote. On May 15th, Palestinians and millions in the Solidarity Movement commemorated the 77th anniversary of the Nakba, the planned ethnic cleansing of most of indigenous Palestinians to create Israel as a settler colony and to subjugate us to an ongoing Nakba of dispossession, displacement, and disenfranchisement. And now Israel is implementing what its leaders call the Gaza Nakba, the world's first live-streamed genocide. Portraying the patent depravity and unspeakable criminality of Israel's genocide as the responsibility of Netanyahu and his fascist government alone betrays either selective amnesia or a prejudiced reading of the current reality. According to a public opinion poll reported in the Israeli media last week, 82% of Jewish Israelis support the forced expulsion of all Palestinians from Gaza, and 56% support even the forced expulsion of Palestinian citizens of present-day Israel, and about 50% support the full extermination of Palestinians in Gaza. Another poll from last week showed a shocking majority of Jewish Israelis opposing the entry of any humanitarian aid into Gaza, despite the horrific images of starving Palestinian babies broadcast worldwide. A recent article in Haaretz exposes that, quote, the widespread killing, starvation, destruction, and expulsion in Gaza would not have been possible without a bright green light from the Israeli Supreme Court, end of quote. The article cites a Supreme Court justice referring to medieval rabbinical rulings to justify the starvation of millions of Palestinians today. Eliminating the natives is, after all, a feature, not a bug, in settler colonial systems. Though its genocide is unprecedented in many ways, Israel's massacres and systematic wiping out of Palestinian towns and villages to forcibly displace their residents are not new. A recent error by Israel's censors has accidentally revealed secret documents exposing Israeli First Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion's conscious decision to wipe out Palestinian villages during the Nakba as a necessary condition to create what Israeli human rights group B'Tselem today calls, quote, a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. The colonial West was complicit then. The colonial West, with most of its politicians, hegemonic academia, cultural and media establishment, military security industrial complex, and its addiction to the genocidal dehumanization of non-European nations, is still complicit now. Arming, funding, and shielding Israel from accountability, coupled with parroting its dehumanizing and genocidal propaganda against Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, the West writ large is a partner in genocide. Emboldened by this shameless complicity, Israel is trying to normalize the fundamentally abnormal and to numb our consciences with its relentless savagery. It views the rise to power of its natural allies, far-right, fascist, and authoritarian forces in the US, Europe, and elsewhere, all patently anti-Semitic, as providing the most opportune moment for finally eliminating the survivors of its ongoing Nakba, not gradually as it has been doing for decades, but in one fell swoop. Never again is now, as Holocaust survivors and Jewish Voice for Peace activists in the US have chanted recurrently throughout this genocide. Repeated UN votes and thousands of solidarity mobilizations worldwide, mainly led by younger generations, attest to the fact that the global majority today sees Israel as a rogue state. Israel has not only exterminated and ethnically cleansed Palestinians, and in a few weeks killed thousands in Lebanon and occupied large swaths of Syria, but it's simultaneously reducing the very tenets of international law to tatters, as Irish President Micheál D. Higgins has put it. Israel and the US are normalizing a might makes right order, posing a fatal threat to struggles for racial, social, economic, climate, and gender justice globally. Trumpism is only the most naked manifestation of this fatal order. Israel's prime minister is wanted by the ICC for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICJ in January decided that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, and in July 2024 ruled that its occupation is illegal and amounts to apartheid. All this triggers legal, not just ethical, obligations for states to end direct and indirect complicity. Palestinians have no illusions, though, that justice will shine on us from the ICJ or the UN. We have international law and the ethical high ground on our side as an indigenous people resisting a depraved genocidal system of colonial oppression to achieve our rights. Ethics and the law are necessary in any liberation struggle, but they're never sufficient. To resist and abolish a system of oppression, the oppressed invariably need power as well, people power, effective solidarity power, grassroots power, intersectional coalition power, media power, cultural power, peaceful disruption power, strategic litigation power, among others. To help decolonize our minds and to defeat the seemingly invincible structures of oppression, we must speak the unspeakable and hold the unaccountable to account. After all, the most profound ethical obligation, especially in times of extreme oppression, is to do no harm and to stop and repair harm done in your name. Palestinians are not begging the world for charity. We're calling for meaningful solidarity. But before both, we are demanding an end to complicity, to do no harm. Ending complicity in grave human rights violations is a matter of duty, not discretion. In the words of Craig Mokhaybar, former senior UN human rights official and part of the Gaza Tribunal, of course, the ICJ ruling about Israel's illegal occupation makes BDS, quote, not only a moral imperative and constitutional and human right, but also an international legal obligation. As the struggle that abolished apartheid in South Africa has shown, ending state, corporate, and institutional complicity in Israel's system of oppression, especially through the nonviolent tactics of BDS, is the most effective form of solidarity with our liberation struggle. This is part of our resistance. BDS strives to build intersectional people power to end Israel's illegal occupation, its apartheid regime, and to uphold the right of Palestinian refugees to return and receive reparations. The BDS movement categorically rejects all forms of racism, including anti-Jewish racism. There's nothing Jewish about Israel's occupation, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, or genocide, and therefore there's nothing anti-Jewish in supporting BDS to end these injustices and dismantle these structures of settler colonial oppression. Having planted many seeds and prepared the ground with large intersectional coalitions, and having developed an exceptionally effective toolbox of strategies and tactics for ending complicity, the BDS movement, with its numerous partners representing tens of millions worldwide, has mobilized a truly unprecedented global wave of effective strategic solidarity. Spreading apartheid-free zones, mass protests, courageous peaceful disruptions of complicit businesses, particularly military-related ones, coordinated campaigns against maritime, military, and fuel transfers, student-led encampments, and the immense growth of support for academic boycott and divestment on campuses, hundreds of cultural spaces, and tens of thousands of artists and writers joining the ranks of the cultural boycott, etc., all attest to this resilient wave. Israel's economy is experiencing what 130 of its top economists describe as a spiral of collapse, with an almost unprecedented brain drain, a nose-diving tech industry, and a credit rating that is near junk levels, according to Moody's. Intel has frozen its planned $25 billion investment in Israel, increasingly seen by investors as part of the BDS movement's work, in addition to other factors. Israel is increasingly being seen as a shutdown nation, and it has ranked dead last among 50 countries in the recently released Nations Brand Index. But what does BDS have to do with this? The chairman of the Israel Export Institute admits, quote, BDS and boycotts have changed Israel's global trade landscape, end of quote. Israel has, in fact, since 2014, considered the BDS movement a strategic threat to its entire regime of oppression, allocating massive intelligence, propaganda, lobbying, and legal resources for fighting it. As revealed recently in an investigative report in The Nation magazine, Israel and its lobby groups in the US alone have allocated some $900 million for fighting BDS over a period of a few years. To end the US-Israeli genocide and help us dismantle Israel's 77-year-old regime of settler colonial apartheid, the BDS movement calls for intensifying grassroots and civil society pressure like never before, on several levels. On the UN and international organizations to expel Israel from the UN General Assembly and from international sporting events, the Olympics, FIFA, UEFA, etc., and reactivating the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid, and ending UN's shameful contracts with complicit companies, including tech giants Microsoft, Palantir, Google, Amazon, Cisco, and IBM, that are implicated in Israel's illegal occupation, apartheid, or genocide. That's one level. Also pressure on states to cancel or suspend economic relationships, trade agreements, and academic relations with Israel that may contribute to its unlawful presence and apartheid regime, and to impose a full arms embargo on Israel, holding all arms agreements, imports, exports, transfers, including of dual-use items that are used against the Palestinian population under occupation, as called for by leading UN human rights experts. Third state obligations also include investigating, and where sufficient evidence exists, prosecuting potential Israeli and other perpetrators who may have committed crimes as members of the Israeli army or settler movements, as called for by Amnesty International. We call for pressure on regional and local government city councils to immediately end collaboration with Israel and its complicit institutions and city councils, to pressure, divest from, and exclude from contracts complicit corporations, to adopt ethical procurement policies, as well as, where applicable, ethical investment policies that exclude contracts with corporations involved in grave human rights violations anywhere in the world. They must also prevent the transit of military and dual-use items through their cities to Israel. We call for pressure on complicit corporations with boycotts, divestment, and exclusion from contracts to end their complicity in Israel's crimes, especially those on the BDS priority targets. We call for pressure on trade unions and professional associations to translate solidarity into adopting procurement and, where applicable, investment policies that exclude complicit corporations, and to apply serious pressure on governments, corporations, and institutions, including through divestment and peaceful disruption, to end complicity. Finally, we call for pressure on academic, cultural, and sports institutions to cut all ties with apartheid Israel, as was done with apartheid South Africa, and with its complicit institutions, and to divest from complicit corporations. But some of us are having genocide fatigue and see no hope, some may say. Well, Palestinians do not have the luxury of genocide fatigue, nor of giving up hope. Also, as British Pakistani writer Nadim Aslam says, quote, "Despair has to be earned. I personally have not done all I can to change things. I haven't yet earned the right to despair." End of quote. For a century, the Palestinian people has been resisting in various forms colonial oppression. We've never given up. We insist on what Archbishop Desmond Tutu once called our full menu of rights. We strive to thrive in our homeland in freedom, justice, equality, and unmitigated dignity. Do not fall into complacency until you've ended state, corporate, and institutional complicity in Israel's crimes. Do not give up hope. You have not earned it yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we bring this session to a close, please join me in thanking our speakers, both online and in the room. Gurav Mila Mahadev. And the tribunal will reconvene at 2 p.m. local time. Thank you.